we're going to go to the great Mike Baker, former CIA operations officer and host of the incredibly popular and wonderful podcast, The President's Daily Brief. Mr. Baker, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. It's not only incredible, it's wonderful. I appreciate the superlatives. And thank you for my...
I could give many more, but it'd take all of our 10 minutes together, man. So we're talking about the differences between these administrations. Let's start with the border. We haven't touched on the border yet. And one thing that's come to the forefront of this border conversation, I'm glad it has, is the amount of Chinese nationals who are coming over. And it seems like they're taking like a different route in a different way, and there's some intent behind this. What insight can you give here?
Yeah, well, part of the problem is we don't know how many and who are coming across. So it's not even, as people always say in Washington, D.C., but they don't really mean it. It's not a partisan issue. You know, this should be a bipartisan issue. They never mean that. But it really, in all honesty, shouldn't be a partisan issue. Border security is national security. You cannot stand around and say that as a federal government, you're concerned about your homeland security, national security issues if you don't secure the border. Right? That's why every other country out there does that. And so, you know, the difference, if you say, okay, what is the difference between, I suppose, the two administrations? If you set aside politics and just look at operational, impact of policies, it's clear that over the past 3 years, for whatever reason, the Biden administration has allowed at best, a semi-porous border, at worst, basically an open border for all intents and purposes. And the biggest issue there is, look, aside from the fact that just in the last 3 months, we had 785,000 or so known encounters. We don't know the number of known gotaways of people who came across. And as you said, they could be Chinese intel. They could be terrorist related. We don't know, right? So it's not hyperbole. It's not, being overly dramatic to point that out, because that is specifically a homeland security issue.
From that homeland security, national security issue, should we be more concerned about the Chinese national coming over than the guy from Nicaragua? Or is the guy from China coming over here for a better life and more opportunity as well?
Well, the answer is yes to all of those things. Look, there are a lot of them, of folks coming across, regardless of where they're coming from, that are looking to get away from a crappy situation and find a better life. That's fine, right? But there should be a process in place, just like there is, again, with every other country. There should be a process in place for those people to come into the country and eventually settle here and assimilate. And then you've got people who have nefarious intent or are coming across for criminal purposes, or in some cases, coming across from an intel perspective, right? And that's where your concern is with, is the Chinese PLA looking at this and going, you know what, we sure would like to, put some more sleeper cells in the US or the Russians or the Iranians. And then you've got the terrorist aspect of this. And there is no doubt that the terrorists take advantage of essentially what is an open border or an easy border to access.
Yeah, we were talking to Tim Kennedy the other day, former Green Beret and now MMA guy. And he was just giving some insight into how few people it would take to cause some real big problems if they were placed in the right opportunities with our infrastructure, et cetera. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and he's right. And it's not rocket science. If you just look at one of our primary concerns, the frailty of our power system, of our power grids. We have an east grid, a west grid, and then Texas, of course, has their own grid. And so you have those. They were never designed or built to withstand a terrorist attack. They certainly weren't designed and built to withstand a cyber attack. So that's why you can pass by within feet of any substation, across America. That's why, we've got a real concern in Washington, D.C. When you ask people in the intel community or in the Pentagon, what are your top concerns? What are your primary concerns of the moment, right? Some of them haven't changed for years, Iran, Russia, China. But you always get up there as well now is the infrastructure and the threats, because every day, state-sponsored entities and pseudo-state actors and others with just bad intent are probing and testing and essentially mapping out our infrastructure. So the ability to target our power grids, our water treatment facilities, our transportation mechanisms and protocols, our movement of cash. If you think about it, our financial systems, if you think about where the next war is going to be fought, part of that, and the reason why China and Russia and others with wherewithal are putting together these playbooks, mapping out our infrastructure, is because that's where a major global conflict will be fought, right in the homeland, shutting down as much as possible of the infrastructure, because that takes the fight right to the people, that demoralizes them, that breaks morale, and that'll be the intent. So you have cyber activity, you're going to have a targeting of the infrastructure, and you're certainly going to have what we already have, which is weaponization of space. It's going to be a different look. You're still going to have door kickers, right? You still have boots on the ground, but it's going to be a new theater of war.
That is quite terrifying how unprepared we are for that. We should do another special on that. We'd love to have you back. We do more detail because I know the head of the FBI the other day was talking about how China has already deeply infiltrated our infrastructure systems. And it's just a matter of time and to what extent. Like, will they just shut down our military bases or will they shut down the whole city that the military base is in? It's like, oh, geez, great. Right. And then I remember the Colonial Pipeline a couple of years ago when they hacked into that. And the head of it came back into Congress and they said, well, why didn't you just turn it on by hand? And they're like, all the guys who knew how to do that are dead. That we don't know how to do it by hand anymore. It's only by computer now. So we're in big trouble with that.
It's like systems. It's like the machinery, not to oversimplify this, for our power grids, right? We don't build that here in the States anymore, right? Trying to replace some of the major equipment and hardware that allows our power systems to work it would be a nightmare. And so, yeah, the answer is they'll do all of the above. They'll go after the military bases, but they'll certainly go after the cities because, again, what do you want to do? You want to break the morale and the will of the people. So that is why that effort goes on. And if people understood how aggressive that effort was to map out and to understand and to test and to probe our infrastructure over every day, a lot of people wouldn't sleep at night.
If you are listening to this on the President's Daily Brief podcast, I host my own podcast. It's called Politics by Faith. And the point of this podcast is to help us have less anxiety, right? Especially all that first talk about taking our infrastructure down. That causes anxiety. So the point of my podcast is to take away this anxiety as we look through these issues through a biblical lens. The theme of our entire special today that Mike Baker was a part of is to talk about the main differences between Trump and Biden when it comes to foreign policy. And the main difference, as all of our guests have said, is it's very simple. Trump has a America first worldview, and Biden has a global citizen worldview. That America first, that's not just a snappy little campaign slogan like Hope and Change was with Obama. That is a worldview. It is how to look at problems around the world. And so is global citizen. All right, global citizen, maybe it sounds like a good thing to people who aren't thinking. It's very kumbaya, we're all in this together. It sounds very nice. But globalization doesn't have a great look in the Bible, right? First of all, there's examples in the Bible of a globalized effort through military conquest. Look at the Assyrian Empire. They tried to do it. World conquest isn't very nice. The Nazis also wanted a one world government, their government. Same with the Marxists and the communists since. But it's an ancient desire. Even this desire to all be the same. We have the Tower of Babel, 21st century BC. Rather than fill the earth as God commanded, mankind rebelled and centralized in one city and tried to make a name for themselves with this tower up to the sky. And it was led by King Nimrod, which means rebel. God scattered the people for their rebellion. And then King Nebuchadnezzar, he dreamed of globalization under his own reign. He'd be the king, of course. Didn't go well for him. The history of mankind is the history of empires under evil rulers. Why do we think that our newfangled world vision, one world vision, would be any different? Maybe it'll look nicer getting there. It'll be very shiny and fancy new technology, no doubt. But the end result will be the exact same. So in conclusion to our special, I'm here to give permission. It is okay to have different nation states and to defend the interest of yours. Just like, especially when your nation state wants to live life just like individual Christians should, want to live quiet and peaceable lives. You're not a bad person for opposing globalization or for not wanting to be a global citizen. It's okay to believe in and advocate for America first. More on our podcast, Politics by Faith. Also, Breitbart News Daily on SiriusXM Patriot every weekday, which we simulcast right here starting at 7 a.m. every morning right here on the First TV.